Between 235 and 284 CE, Rome had over 20 emperors. All but one died violently. Most ruled for less than 3 years. This wasn't the fall of Rome. That came 200 years later. So how did Rome survive this crisis? And why couldn't it survive the next one? To understand why Rome eventually fell, we need to understand how it almost fell and didn't. Look at this timeline. Each block represents an emperor. The width shows how long they ruled. Red means violent deaths, green means natural causes, one green block in 50 years. The rest, assassinated, killed in battle, murdered by their own troops. Some lasted months, a few lasted weeks. The Roman army had discovered it could make and unmake emperors. That discovery nearly destroyed the empire. The succession crisis didn't exist in isolation. It fed into two other catastrophes and they fed back into it. External enemies pressed from every direction. The Sassanid Persians attacked from the east. Germanic tribes crossed the Danube and Rhine. These weren't random raids, they were coordinated invasions against an empire too distracted by civil war to defend itself. Meanwhile, the economy collapsed, trade routes disrupted, tax revenues plummeted. The currency debased so severely that inflation spiraled out of control. Soldiers demanded payment. Emperors who couldn't pay didn't last long. These three crises formed a death spiral. Civil war weakened border defenses. Weakened defenses invited invasion. Invasion disrupted trade and agriculture. Economic collapse made it harder to pay soldiers. Unpaid soldiers made new emperors. New emperors meant more civil war, round and round. For 50 years, Rome spun through this cycle. Provinces broke away. The empire fragmented into three competing states. Complete collapse seemed inevitable. Then came Diocletian. Diocletian rose to power in 284 CE and did something remarkable. He diagnosed the structural problems and redesigned the system. For political chaos, he created the tetrarchy, ruled by four co-emperors, each governing a quarter of the empire, each with a designated successor. No more soldiers gambling on who to crown next. For military threats, he reorganized the army. Mobile field forces could respond to invasions. Static border troops held the frontiers. For economic collapse, he restructured taxation and attempted price controls. Some reforms worked better than others, but the bleeding stopped. Diocletian saved Rome. The empire stabilized. It would endure another 2 centuries. So here's the puzzle that historians still debate. If Diocletian solved these problems, why did Rome fall 200 years later to remarkably similar threats? Look at the parallels: political instability, barbarian invasions, economic strain. The 5th century crisis resembles the 3rd century crisis in almost every dimension, yet the outcomes diverged completely. The first major debate, external versus internal causes. Here's what's strange about the barbarian invasions. The groups that sacked Rome, Visigoths, Vandals, Ostrogoths, don't appear overwhelmingly powerful in historical records. They weren't vast armies sweeping away all resistance. They were often relatively small groups exploiting Roman weakness. This leads some historians to emphasize internal rot. The empire had hollowed itself out. Military strength declined. Political will evaporated. The barbarians didn't conquer Rome so much as walk into a vacuum. Others countered the cumulative external pressure, eventually exceeded any empire's capacity to respond. The debate continues. The second debate challenges the premise entirely. Did Rome really fall? Look at this map. Right? In 476 CE, when the last Western emperor was deposed, the Eastern Roman Empire remained intact. Constantinople continued as an imperial capital. The Eastern Empire, what we call Byzantium, survived and thrived for another 1,000 years. At times, Constantinople appeared capable of reconquering the West. Emperor Justinian nearly succeeded in the 6th century. If half the empire survives and prospers, can we really speak of Rome falling? Or did the empire simply transform, with its center of gravity shifting eastward? The third debate involves religion. Edward Gibbon, writing in the 18th century, famously blamed Christianity for weakening Roman martial values. Pacifism replaced patriotism. Resources flowed to churches instead of legions. The best minds entered monasteries instead of military service. Modern historians consider this oversimplified. Christianity became Rome's official religion under Constantine, yet the empire survived another century and a half. The Eastern Empire remained Christian and endured a millennium. Still, the question persists, how did a persecuted religion become the empire's official faith, and what did that transformation mean for Roman identity and institutions? These debates aren't just academic, they're about how we understand collapse itself. The 3rd century crisis and the 5th century collapse present nearly identical symptoms with opposite outcomes. Diocletian's reforms bought time, perhaps 2 centuries of it. But they didn't solve underlying structural problems. Or perhaps the West was always more vulnerable than the East, or cumulative damage eventually exceeded any system's recovery capacity. Single cause explanations fail here. The next time someone offers a simple explanation for why a great power fell, remember the 3rd century crisis. Rome almost died in 284. It survived. Then it faced similar problems and didn't. The difference matters, and historians are still arguing about what it was.